Welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and today what we're going to be talking about is how do other teams feel about what the Miami Dolphins are doing this offseason. So all this time for the past couple of shows or so, we've been talking about what do the Miami Dolphins think of the AFC East, or at least how do we perceive our rivals in the AFC East. How do we look at the Buffalo Bills? How do we look at the New England Patriots? How do we look at the New York Jets? And all of that is just fine and dandy. But you have to wonder, what do the Buffalo Bills think of the Miami Dolphins? Do the Miami Dolphins rivals perceive them as a legitimate threat in the AFC East or in the AFC in general? And we're going to go ahead and get into all of that. I listened to a Buffalo Bills podcast, Locked On Bills, by the way, and he was going through the motions of discussing how do the rest of the AFC East rank along with the Buffalo Bills on the defensive side of the ball. And that's the part that we really want to focus on right now because that's where most of the change has been made, right? We've talked about how Vic Fangio is now the defensive coordinator. We've talked about all the additions that they've made on the defensive side of the ball. And we're going to discuss what do other teams think of the Miami Dolphins as they stand. So let's go ahead and jump into all that. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention that this show is brought to you as always by our good friends over at U-Brake Wheel Fix. U-Brake Wheel Fix is a complete automotive wheel solution. Ever parked too close to the sidewalk curb? U-Brake Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, and curb rash. Or maybe your wheels are faded or peeling. You don't need to replace them, as U-Brake Wheel Fix can refinish them to like new. Offering complete refinish options through powder coating, machining, and polishing, U-Brake Wheel Fix is the answer to all of your wheel needs. And if you're just looking to give your ride a new look, U-Brake Wheel Fix also offers many car customizing options, such as new custom wheels and tires from your favorite brands, performance upgrades, window tinting, and suspension modifications. Located just south of Aventura, you can reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 or online at ubrakewheelfix.com. They are really active on all social media platforms at U-Brake Wheel Fix, so shoot them a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and get an estimate in just minutes. So don't delay, go to U-Brake Wheel Fix and start customizing your ride to show off your Dolphins fandom today. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is a revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less than their projected stat. They give you free squares over there at Prize Picks. They give you special Taco Tuesday promos to take advantage of, Flex Friday specials where you can get your money back if you lose or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you are any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, that's promo code 5, FIVE. Go to PrizePicks.com, deposit your $100, and let Prize Picks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with and get started winning today. Okay, everybody, let's get into this. So I listened to the Locked On Bills podcast with Joe Marino. Any draftniks out there will recognize that name as being part of the same group that Kyle Krabs was a part of. It's the Draft Network. So that's usually my go-to whenever it's time to actually look at draft prospects, is to just go and check out and see their scouting reports and figure out who is who as far as the NFL draft is concerned. But he also happens to host the Locked On Bills podcast, and he's the one who would be considered, I guess, an expert in all things Buffalo Bills. So I went ahead and I listened to his podcast, and he was talking about what exactly the AFC East is doing on defense and where does every single team rank on that list. And I gotta tell you, just based on the rankings that he was giving the Miami Dolphins, I have to say that I'm actually impressed with his level of, let's say, I don't want to say objectivity. I don't want to say that because then it makes it feel like that the only reason I view him as objective is because he was complimentary to the Dolphins. That's not what I'm saying. I would say that he is being just that. He's being complimentary of the team. He's not taking pot shots at anybody. He's not saying, oh, well, this team sucks and this team is no good because X, Y, and Z. Because a lot of us podcast people, we tend to fall into that trap. We only talk about our team. We don't give any respect to any other team, but that's not exactly the most professional way of doing it, is it? So I went ahead and I listened to the podcast, and first he went position group by position group. And the first thing that he talked about was the pass rush. Now, he went into the Jets and the Patriots as well, but we're going to be focusing on what he thought of the Bills and what he thinks of the Miami Dolphins. So starting with the defensive ends and the pass rushing group, he ranked the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins pass rush as equal. his rankings go all the way up to 5. He ranked both of their rankings as 4.25 on the scale. The reason for that is because all of the pieces that the Miami Dolphins have on their defense right now, they have Bradley Chubb, who is an above average pass rusher when he's healthy, and he's going to be working with Vic Fangio again. Obviously, you still have Jalen Phillips, who has been an absolute rock star for the Miami Dolphins, and he could potentially get 15 sacks if he was given the opportunity. The Dolphins added Malik Reed, basically taking over the Melvin Ingram role, I suppose. Now, the one thing that did get to me, and it's something that I feel like needs to be addressed briefly, is that he included Andrew Van Ginkel on that pass rushing line. And from what we understand and what the reports have been, is that Andrew Van Ginkel is actually getting work in the middle of the field, not as a pass rusher. Is that to say that he's never going to pass rush again? I don't know if I would go that far, but I would go ahead and say that it's more than likely that he's going to be spending a lot more time in the middle of the field than in the pass rushing, which means I don't really qualify Andrew Van Ginkel as being part of that group anymore. But he did include Emmanuel Ogbah in that group, which is the correct way to do things. Emmanuel Ogbah is still a really good pass rusher when given the opportunity and when he's healthy. And you include, again, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Malik Reed in that group. It makes sense why a lot of people would be able to say that it's a 4.25 out of 5. Now, with Buffalo, obviously, he includes Von Miller in that group of pass rushers. A lot of really good players on their side of the field. Cameron Klein, he was talking about, AJ Epinesa, Leonard Floyd, who is there now, Shaq Lawson, Gregory Rousseau. Now, we as Miami Dolphins fans look at Gregory Rousseau and say that, oh, well, he wasn't as good as Jalen Phillips. And while some people might argue that, the way that Joe Marino was talking about him is that he is also an up-and-coming young player, and we'll have to just keep an eye on that. It's very possible that they are going to be neck and neck when their careers come to an end if maybe people just don't develop as fast as others. For there was a time that we thought Gregory Rousseau was going to turn out to be the better player between him and Jalen Phillips, and suddenly Jalen Phillips took a massive leap forward and Gregory Rousseau actually slowed down a little bit. So we will see what ultimately comes of that. But I find it very interesting that as a Buffalo Bills expert, Joe Marino went ahead and ranked the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills pass rush as equal. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about real quick, he ranked the interior linemen. So that means the defensive tackles, right? So watch this. He ranked the Buffalo Bills as a 4 out of 5. The reason why he picked that for a 4 out of 5, just talking about the defensive tackles on this list, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, who recently just got paid, Jordan Phillips is good as depth, so it's not like he's expected to start anymore. We remember Jordan Phillips? Man, I remember when he was with the Miami Dolphins. He was a beast when it came to knocking down passes. He was a lot of fun, I'll say that. He wasn't at his peak, I'll also say that. But he was fun when he was around. But the Buffalo Bills do have some pretty good interior defensive linemen, so we got to give him credit on that one. Now, the Miami Dolphins, on the other hand, watch how he ranked them. He actually ranked them a 4.25. A 4.25. So that he actually ranked the Miami Dolphins defensive linemen, the interior ones, higher than the Buffalo Bills. And I'll give you one reason why. And it's the only reason that really matters. He even talked about this during his evaluation. Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer are just that good as a tandem. They are both brutally good when it comes to run defense, and for all the talk about how Christian Wilkins is not good enough as a pass rusher, he talked about during his Jets evaluation that Quinnen Williams is considered the best defensive tackle in the division. If you want to go there, fine. I've had arguments about this all over Twitter, and I've talked about it on the show as well. I think Christian Wilkins deserves elite level respect. Pass rushing is not the only thing that matters. Yes, Quinnen Williams has the upwards momentum when it comes to pass rushing. He's a better pass rusher between him and Wilkins. But as far as what everything else goes, as far as everything else they accomplish, I'm still putting Christian Wilkins on the same level as a Quinnen Williams, just because his pass rushing may not be up to snuff, and that's only because his numbers, not necessarily his skill. I'm sure that if Christian Wilkins really wanted to, he could absolutely get some massive sack numbers. But his role in this defense is something that he knows, he cherishes it, and he does it well. He creates chaos in the backfield, not because he's chasing down quarterbacks, but because he lets everybody else around him chase after the quarterbacks. And Zach Sealer basically does the same thing. Zach Sealer is always in there making things happen in the backfield. So between the two of them, they are they're an unstoppable force that any offensive line is just sweating the idea of. I wouldn't say it's like on the level of Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is his own stratosphere. But Christian Wilkins and Zach Steeler, when I say that they are the Daryl Gardner and Tim Bowens of the modern era, I mean that. And by the way, I feel, me personally, Christian Wilkins is Tim Bowens and Zach Steeler is Daryl Gardner. No disrespect to Daryl Gardner. He was really good, but Tim Bowens is a Miami Dolphins legend. I just personally feel that that's the case. So I would have put those two, comparatively speaking. Now, Raekwon Davis is basically the only other name on here that has any real clout, I guess you could say. And Raekwon Davis, by the way, he has not lived up to the expectations that so many people had of him. He is changing the way his body is shaped this offseason. Maybe they're looking to change his role in the defense. If that's the case, maybe this will finally unlock the potential that he had in Alabama, that what made the Miami Dolphins draft him in the first place. But think about this. Christian Wilkins and Zach Steeler, by themselves, together, were good enough to get a Buffalo Bills podcaster to rank the Miami Dolphins interior defensive linemen higher than the Buffalo Bills defensive linemen. That's pretty crazy when you think about that. And it just goes to show, when it comes to defensive linemen, Miami has a lot of good luck and a lot of good evaluation. So props to them on that one. All right, next thing he evaluated, the linebacker core. Now, this is where I feel like the Miami Dolphins are kind of neck and neck a little bit. I personally, quite frankly, part of me wants to disagree with him only because I don't know what kind of depth we can safely say the Dolphins have. There's a lot of unknowns with the Miami Dolphins. But he went ahead and he said that Matt Milano is already the best linebacker in the division, so he thinks that he has the best linebacker. And as far as his production goes, it's hard to argue with him. Matt Milano is one of the core staples of that defense. I don't think the Miami Dolphins can say the same about Jerome Baker. I think with Baker, they can kind of get along without him. But Matt Milano is a big, big part of that Buffalo Bills defense. But here's the funny thing. Marino ranked him as a 3. And he gave the Dolphins a 3.5. So why? Why does he feel that way? Because the way that he puts it, the Buffalo Bills don't have anybody who they can really put next to Matt Milano and say that the whole thing is going to be taken care of. Okay, that's fair. You guys just lost, the Buffalo Bills just lost Tremaine Edmonds, and they didn't really go out of their way to find an expensive way to replace that spot. So there was no big draft investment. There was no big monetary investment to try to replace him, nor did they try to push everything they could to make sure that he stayed in Buffalo. So Tremaine Edmonds is gone. Matt Milano's still there. They don't have as strong of a linebacker core as they did before. But why would they go ahead and make it so that was the case? Maybe they just have faith in guys like Trevin Howard, Tyrell Dodson, Terrell Bernard. Those were some names that were brought up by Marino in his evaluation. As far as the Dolphins go, though, here's the way that he put it. He gave the Dolphins a 3.5 because Jerome Baker he's not a superstar. He's not the one pushing this 3.5 right now. Jerome Baker is a passable starter in his evaluation. I personally feel like, and I think a lot of other Dolphins fans would agree with me. Some might not, but some would also. And I know that the folks here at the 5 Reasons Sports Network, we tend to have a little bit of a higher respect for Jerome Baker than a lot of other people do. Jerome Baker was asked to do a lot in this defense in the past couple of years. He's basically being expected to be the star linebacker. And some people, when you're giving them too much to do, they can't necessarily step up to the plate. There are some things that you just need help to accomplish. Jerome Baker he's a very good linebacker. But the problem is that when you need him to be everything at once, then yeah, he tends to fall short because he can't cover tight ends and wide receivers and running backs and also rush the passer and also stuff the run and also do everything else that was expected of him. You can't spy the QB on top of all that. You can't ask him to do everything. What Jerome Baker does best, he rushes the passer, he can make tackles, but you can't have him do everything. He's not that kind of a guy. So, but here's the thing. In Marino's estimation, David Long Jr. could potentially be that kind of a guy. He's the kind of playmaker that pushes the Dolphins over the Buffalo Bills linebacker core in the Buffalo Bills fans' estimation. None of this is my evaluation. I'm giving you my opinion on his evaluation, just as a reminder to everybody. So he thinks that the Miami Dolphins linebacker core, with the addition of David Long Jr., and knowing that as far as depth goes, he doesn't, because again, he didn't even consider Andrew Van Ginkel as part of the equation. So that means that the depth that he was looking at was basically set to be Duke Riley and Channing Tindall. And by the way, just as a reminder, Channing Tindall was one of the guys that I said would be part of the surprise training camp cuts. I don't think he makes this team because I don't think he has a role in this team that somebody else can't do just as well. And in Marino's case, Channing Tindall did not even come up in the discussion. So he didn't even look at him. So this is all being pushed from just how good he thinks David Long Jr. can be. So now that does beg the question, if you don't think Jerome Baker is so special, why do you rank the Buffalo Bills lower than the Dolphins linebacker core if you feel like Matt Milano is the best linebacker in the AFC East? Well, his uncertainty in who's actually going to be next to Milano as a linebacker now is what's pushing that. He recognizes that Jerome Baker is a good starter. He just doesn't think he's a great starter. But a good starter is better than a starter who they don't even know who it is yet. Next up, we'll talk about the cornerbacks. And here's the thing, guys. Once again, so far we've been going through all of this, and the Miami Dolphins are pretty either equal or better than the Buffalo Bills defense this entire time that we've been talking about this. And it continues here. So the Buffalo Bills defense, looking at the cornerbacks, he ranked them either a 3.75 or a 4, depending on if Tre'Davious White is back to form for them. And while the Buffalo Bills do have some young players who they could potentially look at and think, okay, there might be something there, Teron Johnson, Dane Jackson, there are other guys on that list that they're looking at, Christian Benford. There are a lot of good players on there that they've been looking at. They just signed Cameron Dantzler, so he's available now there. Kaiir Elam, another dude that did some good things for them. But, in the Buffalo Bills fans' estimation, this is somebody who does this for a living, folks. He thinks the Miami Dolphins have a better secondary, at least as far as cornerbacks go. Because he gave the Miami Dolphins a 4.5. And the reason why is because, well, what do you think the reason why is? The Miami Dolphins added Jalen Ramsey. They drafted Cam Smith with their first pick in the draft, a second rounder. They're going to be getting Kader Kohu back. They're getting Nick Needham back. And, of course, Xavier Howard is healthy again, and he's going to be pushing to show that he can still be that guy. Look at all the pieces that the Miami Dolphins have in that secondary. And that's not even including the likes of Trill Williams, who looks like he's going to be working in safety, the way that he's bulking up a little bit. There's still so many awesome players on that whole roster that we don't even know about yet. And Justin Bethel, by the way, he doesn't get any love here because he's a special teams guy. But let me tell you something. If push comes to shove and an emergency happens, Justin Bethel can play. Just that wily veteran knowledge, man. Never underestimate it. Never. You just never know. So with all that being said, the Dolphins get a 4.5 in corners, and the Bills get up to a 4, depending on if Tre'Davious White is back to form or not. Xavier Howard, if he comes back to form, hey, at this point you could probably push it up to a 5, but that's just me. I think that this secondary is loaded. Finally, we ended off with safety. And this is the only spot where the Buffalo Bills beat the Miami Dolphins straight up in this Buffalo Bills fans' estimation. Because the Dolphins got a 3.75. And that's the only reason for that is because Javon Holland is so well respected by Joe Marino, who's doing these evaluations. Javon Holland, all Dolphins fans know by now. This kid is something special. He's all over the field, hard hitter, making plays, making tackles. He's just an incredible specimen of football acumen. And now he's going to be getting the chance to play with somebody who knows how to use him properly. Vic Fangio is not going to be expecting Javon Holland to just make up for everybody else's mistakes this season. Hopefully everybody stays healthy. He won't have to be the last man standing if somebody beats Keon Crossan or Justin Bethel or Noah Igbenogany or anybody else who's out there because they just can't keep up. Javon Holland is hopefully going to be able to go back to being an elite playmaker and not so much a janitor on the field, because that is just annoying to watch. So is it any wonder why it looked like Javon Holland took a step back? That's because he was trying to make up for everybody else's work. But the reason the Dolphins are not higher is because even though he likes Deshaun Elliott as a depth piece, and all that is true, he doesn't think that Brandon Jones is anything special yet. He has to see more from Brandon Jones. Now, as a Dolphins fan, I can understand where he's coming from. I like Brandon Jones. I like him a lot. But I can also recognize that there is a very glaring weakness in Brandon Jones' game. He's not somebody built for coverage. He is somebody who is very much in the same vein as a Rashad Jones in the box. He's almost like a linebacker in a way. He's a very hard hitter. He moves fast. He can rush the passer. He's fantastic in those roles. But if you ask him to cover somebody, it's a little bit iffy. So hopefully he's working on improving that. Hopefully he'll be able to add that to his repertoire, and he'll be able to solidify his spot as the starter next to Javon Holland. Because if they can manage to do that, that would be fantastic. That would take a whole lot of pressure off the Dolphins to find somebody else who can get the job done. Because the whole Jordan Poyer thing, that was an experiment. We thought for sure that Jordan Poyer was going to be a Miami Dolphin. He was basically holding up a neon sign that said, "Sign me." And he probably did want to come to Miami, but he also wanted to get paid. And usually the way that these things work is that you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's why we're still having this waiting moment with Dalvin Cook, is because does he want to be a Miami Dolphin or does he want to get paid? He can't have both at this point. So what did the Buffalo Bills get? Well, the Buffalo Bills got a perfect 5 out of 5. So, but in his case, I'll go ahead and give it to him because the Buffalo Bills do have a fantastic list of safeties. Damar Hamlin's going to be coming back. Micah Hyde is still there. Jordan Poyer is still there. And you still have Taylor Rapp there as well. Those guys have a fantastic safety core. So I can't even take that away from them. As far as safeties go, the Miami Dolphins don't compare to the Buffalo Bills because they just have so much depth there. And with the Dolphins, aside from Javon Holland, yes, there are some weaknesses there. There are some limitations. So we will see if somebody comes and steps up to the plate and ends up getting that done. Maybe True Williams is a fantastic safety. We don't know yet. We haven't gotten to see it happen yet. But right now, based on what we're seeing now, I would say, okay, that's an accurate evaluation of the Buffalo Bills. But that still leaves it with a very interesting point. All these categories that we just talked about, pass rush, interior defensive lineman, linebacker, corner, safety, the Dolphins either tied or beat the Buffalo Bills in all but one of those categories. And you could make the argument that safety is not even the most important position on the field. When you talk about positions of value, right? We always do this game. What's more important, a cornerback or a safety? What's more important, a pass rush or a defensive tackle? And most people would tell you, oh, yes, the pass rush is obviously more important. Oh, yes, of course the cornerbacks are more important than a safety because those are the positions that get paid. And if the Dolphins beat the Buffalo Bills in all that, and by the way, the Buffalo Bills lost their defensive coordinator. Now Sean McDermott's going to run the show himself. I'd say the Dolphins have basically eclipsed the Buffalo Bills on paper when it comes to defense. Now, I did not get a chance to listen to the offensive side of it. Maybe I'll go ahead and do that for a future show, just because I'm curious and to see what exactly these guys think of the Miami Dolphins offense. How do they compare to Buffalo? I'm sure that he's going to say Josh Allen is better than Tua. There's no question that they're going to say that. But we'll see if that holds up. Anyway, that's going to be it for this show. Thank you for listening. It's very interesting to kind of get a new perspective on things and see what other teams think of what the Miami Dolphins are doing instead of just me talking about what I think of other teams. So it looks like they have a lot of respect for what the Dolphins are building on defense, and it's kind of hard not to when you know that Vic Fangio is running that show. So I'm very impressed. So that's going to be it. Like I said, if you haven't already done so, make sure you go check out You Break Wheel Fix. Reach out to the staff at 305-748-0112. Mark and his folks would love to help you out with any wheel repair, or if you just need to give your ride an upgrade, go to youbreakwheelfix.com. You can get an estimate in just minutes, and go to prizepicks.com. Use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. And that just means that if you put in $100, they will give you $100, and you don't even have to touch your money until you're done with their money. So go in there and start winning today. All right, we will see you all tomorrow for one more episode of Fins Nation.